Thank you for joining us today for StartupSac Office Hours. We do this once a month. Today's topic is impact over output, why and how your startup can get traction tomorrow. Right, so these are organized by StartupSac. If you're not familiar with StartupSac, we're a nonprofit organization that serves the greater Sacramento region. We advocate the startup and innovation ecosystem. We've got lots of information on our website at startupsac.com, including if you check out the resources tab, you'll see our Sacramento ecosystem diagram, which has lists all the organizations and programs that help support entrepreneurs in our region. Okay, next slide. We're a nonprofit organization and we depend on sponsorship to support the work that we do. We'd like to thank our annual sponsors, SMUD, Witten Law, Bender Insurance Solutions, Nivigen Pharmaceuticals, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Ernst & Young, Clifton Larson Allen, and Moneta Ventures. And we'd like to go ahead and show you a quick little video from SMUD.
My friends and I think about the future a lot.
And it's looking brighter.
Because SMUD's improving our air,
Helping the planet.
and using technology and new ideas to power healthy communities.
Where we can all live, work, and play.
By 2030, SMUD will be 100% carbon-free, so you can live in a clean power city. Join the charge with SMUD at cleanpowercity.org.
Right, so you didn't come here today to hear from me. You came to hear from Allie, who is the founder of MVPs for Founders. She's going to tell you a lot about that. But before MVP for Founder, she was and is the founder of Good Elephant. And a lot of the things that Allie learned while launching Good Elephant, she has applied to MVPs for Founders. So we're going to go ahead and let Allie share her slides with you. And as I mentioned before, during the presentation, you can type a question in the chat or raise your Zoom hand, and either myself or Allie will call on you. So we can probably remove my spotlight, Jeff, and let Allie get with it.
All right. Can you see my slides here?
Yep.
All right, cool. I'm gonna leave it in this mode just so for my own sanity, so I can see what's coming up. Hey everybody, nice to be here. I'm glad that they shared everything about StartupSac because it's an amazing program. I have gotten so much out of it with my startup and even through like validating this idea of my new consulting business. And so it's a wonderful thing that they're doing, Laura and Jeff. So thank you guys. And thanks for having me. So today, what we're going to talk about is prioritizing impact over output and just understanding how you can actually move forward a lot quicker than you might think in your startup idea. So first, I just wanted to get an idea of who's all here in the audience. And so maybe we could have like 3 people just kind of introduce themselves and talk about what they're working on. If you guys want to maybe just unmute yourself and just go right ahead and get going.
Hello. Can I start?
Yes. Hi,
Hi.
Rodrigo.
Well, this is my first time here. I'm just getting to know this group and I'm already excited about it. I have started working earlier this year in a platform. It's actually a mobile app where people can use to create audio in collaboration with other people. So The easiest example is like you can make music, like someone can play guitar, and someone else from another part of the world can play drums, and someone can sing, and so on. And we have just launched the app on the Google Play Store. Yeah, it's an Android app for now. It's still not available for iOS, but we are just starting to kind of trying to attract people to use and to test the platform, and it's like a roller coaster. It's like one day you wake up very excited that things are happening, and next day you're just frustrated that some people just download the app and don't even touch it. So that's the moment we are.
Totally.
So, yeah, thanks for
Cool.
this
Thank you,
opportunity.
Rodrigo. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else want to go? Leslie?
Hi there. Excuse the voice. I'm going on my 1 month of this nonsense of cold and flu. I can talk about 15 minutes and then the voice goes again. So got the Marlena Dietrich going on here. I am working on Planetsense, and Planetsense is a global green alternative to Amazon with both products and services, all of which are sustainable. Serving both consumers as well as organizations, and organizations can use our marketplace as an employee benefit, as an employee, customer, partner, or supplier benefit, incentive, reward, recognition, engagement tool, training tool, and KPI incentive, as well as reward. And so that is Planetsense, and we're at Planetsense, like the coins.us.
Cool. Thank you. And we talked a little bit about what you're doing, so I think this will probably be very helpful, hopefully. One more person, Alan?
I probably represent the longest time in startup mode of anybody. It's about 20 years now, and we're developing a product that relieves intractable chronic pain. What's taken us a long time is we didn't understand how the therapy worked. We couldn't talk about it. That changed a year or so ago, and Laura will be pleased to know that we now have funding from our ex-employees to get through our electrical and safety. Finding people to fund it, all say, when you have revenue, let us know. And that's been very frustrating for the last 6 months or so. And it's actually, I went out to employees that I had to lay off in 2008 in the downturn, and they said, hey, we'll make this go. So at any rate, they put money in for that. So this impact over output is very interesting to me, because it's now the time for us to be, I'm going to say, a real startup, which before was all preparation. So anyway, thank you for having programs like this.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Cool. So I am going to, there we go. Now you guys are floating heads at the top. Okay, perfect. So great. So awesome. And I'm sure everybody else has awesome stuff that they're working on too. So as we go through questions and stuff, please don't hesitate to ask. And Laura and Jeff will be kind of looking at the chat, and or just raise your hand. So first of all, I do want to make this kind of interactive, right? So you can do as much or as little as you want. It's really fun if you just do what is coming through. Don't force anything. Don't try to, get more out. Just do what's coming through. So our first little write it down exercise, right, will be, I'm not going to say anything yet. I would just like you to write down what you've got in your head, as simple as you can. Like, what problem are you solving? What's your vision? What does it look like in your head? Is it a mobile app? Is it a website? Is it a marketplace or a service? Is it an in-person event? Whatever that might be, I'll give you a minute or so just to think about that. And I know you've probably done some of these exercises before, but it's always good to kind of get back to the basics here. I'll give you 20 more seconds. All right, cool. So, thanks for humoring me. I will ask you to do more stuff like that. So first, let's talk about what should it look like, right? When you're a founder, you have an idea, you put in some time and money, you get something from that time and money, and then you make impact in the world, right? That's the ideal situation. But in reality, our founder journey might look something like this, right? We have an idea, we solve it for ourselves, we're like, aha, everyone has this problem. We envision the world with our solution in it, and then we have an idea of what that solution looks like. We have a huge list of spec requirements. We hire developers to build it. Then we go and spend lots of time and money testing the thing we built. We hope that that will create this impact that we want to create, but then we find out that, oh, you know, we might need to make some tweaks or changes, or actually people didn't want this at all. They wanted a similar thing that looks different. So then we spend more time and, you know, so here we go. And eventually we get to a place, right, where we've found our product market fit, we're making it the impact that we want to see in the world. Now, one of the biggest reasons that startups don't work out, right, is because they get to that point where they realize that people might not actually want what they've spent all of this time and money to build. And then they're kind of stuck because they've run out of resources and they're just tired. So the reason that this happens, right, is a concept in design thinking. It's called the anchor problem. And all of us founders have it. I had it for my startup. And what this means is the solution that you're envisioning is just one solution, right? You have a problem that you're trying to solve. And the reason that you're so passionate about moving your startup forward is that you have this beautiful shiny object in your head, right? You can picture it, you can smell it and feel it. And that's what makes you the founder and the visionary of this. And so that is all well and good. But it may not be exactly what people actually want, right? And that's a really, really tough emotional problem to crack. So I'll give you an example for my startup, Good Elephant. My problem that I saw was that yoga classes were not inclusive or affordable enough. So I thought that the solution to that was connecting teachers with local businesses that wanted to host their events, and having an app where people could sign up for those events. Well, when I stepped back and thought about it later, that isn't actually the smallest thing that I could have built, but I'll get into that. So when we step back and look at it from a design thinking perspective, there's actually many ways that we can solve a single problem. Like if the problem is that your hair is on fire, you can use your watering can to put water on your head, but you could also dunk your head in the swimming pool. You could use a bucket, you could use a faucet, you could put a sheet over your head. There's many different ways to solve this problem, and they might not look like that anchor solution that you have come up with. So as founders, getting our heads around this different way of thinking is kind of tough, but if we can step back and be open to the possibility that there are many different ways, that's just the great mindset to give us the soil that we need to start building what we're doing. And so what happens when we have this anchor problem is that we get really focused on what we want to build and how we want to build it, right? We know exactly what it's going to be, and now it's just a matter of building it. So what Simon Sinek says, if you guys haven't seen this video, I'll put it in the chat later. It's amazing. It's all about, he repeats it like 5,000 times in the video. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? So his great example is Apple says, we believe in thinking differently, right? If you remember their old marketing campaign, think differently. And what they shared what they believed, and people resonated with that. They're like, oh, I believe that too. I want to be cool and edgy and think differently. And then Apple goes, and by the way, we make computers. Do you want to buy one? And they're like, yes. But at the same time, other computer companies were saying, we build amazing computers. Here's how they're built. Here's what they do. And people weren't as excited about those computers as they were about Apple. So focusing on this why is really, really important. And as a founder, it's easy to get wrapped up in the how and the what. And what happens when we do get wrapped up in that is we end up prioritizing what we call the output. So the output is the amount of stuff we can build, right? So you may have a huge list of requirements. For my company, I had a 50-page long spec doc of everything that I wanted to have in our app. And then you need to, because it's so big, you have to raise money, hire developers to build it, right? And so mostly here we're talking about digital products, but this can also relate to physical products or even services that are supported by technology as well. And so the other way of thinking is prioritizing this impact, right? Asking a question, what does the world look like with my thing in it? After I'm successful, what does the world look like? And so if we switch our thinking and we start to prioritize that impact over the amount of stuff we can build, we start to create a path that's way shorter and easier to get to that impact. And how do we do that practically? We equate the impact we want to make with our actual business traction. And so this is like a huge, once this like clicked in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because a lot of times they're separate and we want to bring them together. We want to equate those two things. And so for example, my friend Mike has a company called Carbon Undone. And so when we went through our user story mapping session together, he defined an impact statement. And this is what I'm going to ask you guys to do too. And his impact statement was he wanted to help 10 small businesses reduce carbon footprint by 50%. And so this impact statement is a short-term what would define your success with the first version of what you're building? How would you, and if it helps to give it a timeline, sometimes that really helps for me to say, okay, I'm going to get this out there in the next month or so, and I'm going to measure it for a couple months. So 3 months from now, imagining myself, how would I feel successful? What needs to happen? And that actually, for a lot of people, it ends up being kind of small, like 10 businesses. Okay, that's actually pretty cool, but that's not a huge, like, you don't need marketing strategies to find 10 people to impact, right? So it kind of eliminates a lot of those other business challenges that we can figure out a little later down the road. And I'll also just do an example, which I'll use. I'm a little side project I have is creating what I call the happy app, where people can find local happy hour on a map. So my impact statement would be helping 10 local businesses increase their happy hour sales by 20%. So I'll ask you guys to think about that. What does it look like on a broader scale for your vision? What does the world look like after you've done it and it's out there? And what outcomes in the next few months would make you feel like you've had success? And a big part of this is defining a quantifiable metric that you can track, right? So for Mike, his whole company is around tracking their carbon emissions. And so he'll really easily be able to look and say, are there 10 businesses? Or is there a 50% reduction? So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think about this. And if you want to share while we're doing it, that would be awesome, because I think that might help other people with their thinking process. Does anybody want to share? Anybody kind of have their impact statement, or still working on it? Daniel, do you want to go? Yeah.
I have a couple questions actually before I can make this statement. So my first question is, where is this impact statement presented at? Is it presented to investors, or is it something on your website that you showcase as a mission statement related kind of thing? And my second question is, for a marketplace startup, so like mine, right, with a two-sided marketplace, should the impact statement be focusing on the paying customer, or the other side of the customers who are not the paying customers? Yeah,
those are okay. Thank you. Yeah, those are both awesome questions. This is just really an internal statement that will help you define your true north. So this isn't, nobody's going to see this. This is just for you. And then in answer to your second question, yeah, later on we'll define our stakeholders. So if you have multiple like personas involved in this, that's totally cool. You could have impact for each side of your marketplace. Sweet. I'll just give us a couple more minutes. And please feel free to raise your hand when you have your statement if you want to share. Alan, yeah.
Okay, so for how would the world change, and patients would have who have no path forward with chronic pain would get their lives back,
Okay.
and they would have hope again. So that's the really big idea, is that they could have hope again. The customers are actually the practitioners, and they would feel better about how they're able to help their marginal patients, the people who come in and they no longer don't have anything for them now.
Mhm.
And the quantifiable measure of success is actually a little further out, and that's the capitated Medicaid providers who care for 53 million people in America could make money, and
Okay.
they'd want the device.
Okay. Do you have like, if you can imagine those providers making money, is there a number that comes to mind that would feel successful in
Uh,
the first kind of iteration?
well, in the first iteration, it's the practitioners that
Okay.
are able to help it. So we already have probably between 20 and 50 people waiting for what we can't deliver yet. And
Okay.
we're stuck. Basically, we have to do electrical and safety testing. We didn't have the funding to do that. So once we have that, which probably is a February timeframe, then it's on down the road. And this impact statement is changing how I think about it as we talk. So thank you.
Yay, good. All right, cool. Rodrigo, do you have one ready?
Yes, I do. So let's try this. How the world will change. Well, I'm an engineer who grew up wanting, like, with the wish to be like a musician. I always loved music, but I lost contact with my friends and like people that I used to hang out with, like to make music, we used to play together. So that was so fun. And on the other side, like all the social media nowadays, they focus a lot on image, like how you look like, how you look perfect in that picture, on that photo, that video that you post shows like you are happy and things like that. And with ZipStage, as we are concentrating on audio only, and audio being like the oldest and more important, I would say, like communication um, medium through the history, we just thought about bringing this to the world so people can be creative without being judged by how they look like. So if you are creative, you can whether play an instrument if you have the technical knowledge for it, or maybe even if you don't, if you want to just, you know, do some song and participate on the music, um, just by playing a cartoon box maybe, or you know, like a doorbell ring or whatever. And we made this experiment. We created a video where we create like a music just by using random objects, and it was so cool. We had so much fun creating this video, and we believe that we can impact the world, like people that can be creative without being exposed. Like it doesn't matter how I look like, it really matters like if I'm creative, if I can collaborate with you, like I'm being here in California, some other people in other countries, and we can all create like things together.
Cool.
So
did
this,
you, oh, keep going.
no, go ahead, please.
Did you have an idea of, you know, in 2 months or so, what would look like success for you?
Well, having just launched the app, I believe that in 2 months, I would love to see people start engaging in the app with other people actively. So what I mean is that not only download the app and just see how it looks like and letting it behind, but really like a few people. We don't need like thousands and thousands of people. We just need like a few people that really look at it and say, I can have fun using it, you know. And if we have like 100 people doing this in 2 months, or even less maybe, but I already be happy. Like that will sound like success to me. and then we will see that we are on the correct path.
Cool. Yeah, and I do want to point out a word that you used, actively, right? That's definitely a word that we could attach a metric to, you know. So it's great to know like 100 people, but then the question might be, are they actively doing it? Which might mean 100 people doing it once a week, or, you know, something like that, where you can have this, you can check and say, is it happening? Yes or no, black and white.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there's no maybe.
Cool.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Marie-Angelique? Is that how you say it?
Yes, Marie-Angelique.
Cool.
Hi, I'm excited with these questions, and I'm so glad I joined in these things, just what I needed to clarify things that I'm doing. So anyway, for the first one, how do you want the world change? I have this interesting proposition to throw out there into the world, especially among families and employees and entrepreneurs. The current paradigm, the current default is that after K to 12 and 4 years in college with boatloads of debt, we are happy to land unemployment, right? And then when we cannot make it in the unemployment world, then we kind of start to think, why don't I start an entrepreneurship? Why don't I start a business? How about we flip that? And then say, we develop a family financial culture where entrepreneurship is nurtured from the very start, and it becomes a viable option instead of going to college. And if it takes a freaking 4 years to figure it out, at least you don't go in debt, and you probably have impacted the whole world to some degree or another. And so I say, how about we hack it into the whole world, and if you cannot make it into entrepreneurship, then you go and find a job. The other way.
That sounds great.
After somebody who spent 25 years in Wall Street and then being laid off, not really laid off, I find that employment is the greatest risk somebody can prepare for in life, because even if you have gotten a job, you can get sick. And you're the only income in your family, which happens to myself. And I have not reached my retirement goals yet. What then? And so it was only then that I had to go a lot of training to recalibrate my thinking, because all I know is a job, a paying job, a salary. And that's how I define success. That's how I define myself. And then entrepreneurship, what is this? Those are for the losers who has nothing else to do, who don't have any talent, who hasn't gone to school. And so I had to shift myself that, and I'm now a very, very big proponent for it. And I came up with this idea using my background, my experience, and the fact that I am kind of sick and disabled. And so I try to do things at home. I came up with this idea of mentoring or coaching several group of families. And the span could be, the result can happen in 3 weeks to 3 months to even as long as 3 years. But a certain group of qualified families whom I can coach to do stock market trading. Market trading. And the very first one is to unlock, to do about the misconception, the misinformation, and all the elephant questions in the room about stock market, that is dangerous, that you lose money. The risk is not any different from starting any kind of sort of business, but nobody's. And then they think that you can press a button, you can trade. For heaven's sake, it is not. It's like you're a surgeon, you put your own and you can go and operate on somebody else. Of course, you lose all your money when you go there and you're not prepared at all. And so I want a coaching kind of a school, a huge startup. But like you said, start small. Maybe I'll start a mentoring program first to see if it works.
Yeah, and what would look like success for that? Maybe like 3 families that you talk to, and if one of them decides to start a company, or
From talking to people from a sort ad that we started, we easily could get several hundred interests on it. And so I zeroed in at 21 to follow up on 21 families only, highly filtered, highly qualified, so that they can meet you halfway at least. They are, in other words, the motivated ones.
okay. So 21
I'm
families.
one victim of the how and the what. And now
yes. So
Wow.
maybe defining like an early step that's a signifier of success, because this looks like a long-term thing, right? It might take years to actually know if you were successful with this, but maybe the early signifier is that the families fill out a survey and they are showing that they're more open than they were when they started the coaching program or something like that.
Correct. I came up with several metrics or milestones along the way.
Good.
One is being conversant with the language, with finance as a language, for example. They get into that.
Yeah.
And the next one is they can do simulation. They are successful simulation.
Cool.
And the next one is that we give them actually real money from us. We give them, as kind of investor, give them a very small initial capital and start in a micro level so that they really can test the real stuff, the real risk, and the real thing, not simulation. And then after that, we pass them on to our partners, the proprietary firms, who are really the people who are serious to make it their job. After they pass us, then we send them to the next level where they then can go and be on the job training for proprietary firms out there. That's the next level.
Okay, great.
But
well, it
those are
sounds
the big
like
stuff. The small stuff is if they can do the simulation trading successfully, the kids, they can fund their college.
Great. That sounds
if they
awesome.
still want to go to college.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary Angeli. That's awesome. It sounds like a great start. Let's continue on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. Statement.
Cool. Okay, so we've defined what is a definition of success for us, right? And we've got these quantifiable things. So how are we going to get there? And this is where we come to the big MVP, the minimum viable product. And sometimes I can think of this as a functional prototype as well. So those two kind of terms are interchangeable in my head. There's a lot of different definitions of MVP out there if you Google it. And so this will be the one that we'll work with today, but there's all kinds of philosophies on this too. So the minimum viable product, right, is the smallest amount of stuff we can build in order to validate that our idea is working, right? That we're getting the actual impact that we wanted to make, that we're fulfilling that impact statement. And so I love this diagram. It's from the book User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton. You guys should totally read it. Oh, Mary Angeli, would you mind muting your microphone? Thank you. So it looks like this. It's got a big bird on the front. This is the book that allowed me to start my company because it outlined a process that I'll talk about later called user story mapping. And basically the idea behind this MVP, right, is that if we're setting out to solve a problem of getting from point A to point B, that's the example in this diagram, right? Eventually we'll end up with a car. A car might be the shiny object in our head, right? But in order to build towards that car and to actually be testing whether people actually, first of all, want to get from point A to point B, and second of all, will pay for a way to do that, we don't want to start with a wheel because we can't test that, right? We'd rather start with the skateboard even though it's not as comfortable as a car, it's missing a lot of the features that we will eventually want. But some early adopters will use it because they really have to get from point A to point B, and it will solve that problem for them. So that's what we would be testing if we build a skateboard first. Does that concept make sense to you guys? Any questions on that? This is my favorite. Good. Okay. So in general, what does this look like? It looks like that skateboard. You know, for the telephone, it's the 2 tin cups. It could be a landing page on a website. It could be literally a flyer that you're going and handing out. It could be a simple mobile app that you can build with no code tools real fast. For Airbnb, it was literally a futon and a camera, right? They took some great pictures, posted them up. For Amazon, it was books and shipping materials. So it could be a lot of different things. And this is where that design thinking comes in, right? Stepping back, zooming out, prioritizing the outcomes and the impact we want to make, and being open to the possibility that many different solutions are there. And so right now, what's in all of our heads with our ideas, right? There's just this huge vision floating around, all these different features. So how do we get that into something that will help us move forward? And the answer for me, for my company, and what I do with other companies is called user story mapping. This is Holden. He just got done with the session. He's super stoked. So the first part in this process of user story mapping is focusing on this user, right? So defining our personas, and some of you guys have probably already done a little work on this, but that's what I'm going to ask us to do next, is to think about, who am I building this for? Because they might not look exactly like you or think like you. And so it's really important that as we're mapping out their journey, that we can step into their shoes. And we end up in my sessions giving them an actual name and a little stick figure, a little profile image, so that we can really picture who they are walking through this process. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes and just jotting down anything you know about the people who are involved in this journey. And so for, I don't know if she's still on here. Oh yeah, for Danyun's marketplace, there's probably 2 different personas, right, that are involved in this. And so really understanding each of them and what their motivations are, where they hang out. I've always found that it's really useful to understand, if you're building like a software product, where else online do they hang out? What sort of user interfaces are they used to? I'm currently working on doing UX design for a platform for football coaches, and it involves a lot of videos and a lot of online courses. And so we've talked a lot about who these football coaches are, right? And they probably spend a lot of time on like Netflix and YouTube and maybe Spotify, other maybe a little more old school platforms for their schools that they're involved with. And so we're kind of using those as a starting off point for the design, so that when they get there, they feel really comfortable. They're like, oh, this is familiar territory. So knowing that about them is really helpful in the long run. So I'll give you guys a couple more minutes just to think about who your personas are. Doesn't have to be super detailed. And here I'm using this word stakeholders. When I was a founder, when I first saw that, I was like, what the heck is a stakeholder? It's a person who cares about what's going on within your business. Stakeholders can be investors, they can be yourself as a founder, anyone who has a stake. Here we're talking about the people who are experiencing what you're building. Does anybody want to share a little bit about who they're building this for? Maybe just like a couple bullet points. All right. And this is something that will continue to evolve throughout like the next forever because you're always learning more and more about who you're working with. And if your persona hasn't gotten more detailed and more insightful, then that might be a sign in a few years that you need to go back and talk to them and understand who they are. And actually I have a set of worksheets that I have my founders go through before we do our mapping sessions. And I do encourage everybody to go and talk to at least 20 people about what you're doing and about your idea, just to understand, to watch their face when you tell them. First of all, you get a lot of good information from when their eyes light up, or if they look like they're super bored. And then you're also can get a lot of really good feedback about what your idea is and whether it's actually going to be valuable for them. So we'll continue on here. So let's go through the user story mapping process. Now that we kind of have an idea of who's going through this, right? The process itself looks like taking everything that's in your head. I have this long list of requirements here. In software development, they call them requirements. We can call them features or user stories. And then what we'll do is we'll map those. We can brain dump everything that's in your head and organize it into a timeline. So from the time that somebody hears about your company to the time that they tell their friend about it, their entire experience mapped out on this timeline. And I usually go through some categories. We start with awareness and education, and then we go through the experience, and then advocacy or sharing. So how are they going to tell their friend about it? So that's what I'll ask you to do next. And we definitely won't be able to get through the full user story right today, but we can at least get started. And I would love to answer any questions you guys have about this process. And so the formula for creating this user story, each user story will go on one sticky note, right? So as a therapist, I want to create an account or log in or set my preferences or receive a notification that a patient wants therapy. Or so there's many different the sky's the limit here. We're just brain dumping everything that's in our heads and mapping it onto this timeline. So does anybody have any questions about writing user stories? Okay, cool. I'll give you some time to write some down so that you could look back at them for later, because usually this process takes at least an hour to map out everything that's in your head in the experience from start to finish for each persona. And what we usually do is we have the different personas on colorful sticky notes at the beginning of the timeline. And then we can kind of color code who's doing what. So if the site manager is yellow and the other side of the marketplace is blue, sometimes we also have an admin. Actually, I usually like to add an admin persona, which is basically us as the company. So saying, we're going to send an email notification to you, or we're going to call and confirm on something, or we're going to provide customized feedback on something. So seeing if you can really be very simple when you're writing stuff on your sticky note so that you can see it from far away is really good, because usually you end up with a whole wall of sticky notes. I'm trying to think of any other tips for writing these user stories. As you're thinking, just making sure to write everything down, even if it seems silly, it might be the key ingredient to make something happen. Does anybody have any examples of a user story that they've written down? Yeah, Rodrigo.
Hi, me again.
Yay!
I think I do have, I mean, I don't have the entire thing, but kind of have some ideas here. It's like because we've been thinking about it, and that's actually a great question. We've been talking to both like professional people, like musicians and things related to music as a profession, and also to other users. So, and I'll just mention like a few possible users here. I don't know exactly what would be their answer, but I kind of have some idea.
Okay.
So that the question could be like as a music teacher or professor, I would use this tool for like my students, you know, to help them, something like that. Or as a student, I would use it to, for example, collaborate with my peers or friends from other parts of the world.
Cool. Yeah. And so
As
if I can interject, so those are amazing, like high level ones.
Mhm.
And if you want to break down those two things you just said, each of those could have 30 user stories involved, right? If I'm a music teacher, I want to use this to connect with my students, right? How will they do that? Now we're allowed to get into the how.
All right.
Because this is where we're making it happen, right? So maybe it's like, as a teacher, I need to set up an account or create a music space for my students to join. And as a student, I would be able to join my teacher's music space, or start a session, or make a payment. What a concept. Yeah, so we can even break it down into tinier and tinier pieces, which will be really useful for the next step in the process.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah, I'm taking notes here. It's amazing. Thank you.
Good. Cool. And what I'll do, since we have a little bit more time, is I'll go in here just to give you a good idea, because I know that this is kind of a new thing to learn, the way of doing this. So I've set up a virtual version of sticky notes over here for my Happy App project, right? And so so this is kind of the way that we do it when I do a virtual session. But say I'm a happy hour goer, right? We're in the awareness part of their timeline here. Maybe I hear about it from a friend. So that would be word of mouth, right? Maybe I hear about it from a local business, business advertisement. There we go. How am I going to learn this education process? Is how am I going to learn about what the heck is the Happy App, right? So maybe that means a website landing page. And this is just a very simple kernels of ideas that we're writing down, right? Maybe they can also learn about it through the blog, reading a blog post. And then we get into their actual experience of it. So maybe from the website landing page, they'll download the app. I want them to be able to find it on a map. So view businesses on a map. And I also want them to be able to filter by food or drink. So that'll be on there too. And then once they find the business, I want them to be able to view business details, definitely. And then I want them to be able to call the business. That takes the pressure off of me for having all my information correct. Then I want them to be able to share a promo code with their friend. So this is kind of a high level view. I will go in and probably fill in 50 more sticky notes, right? Of all the little different things that they could do as part of their experience. And then when I bring the business owners in, right, they'll be able to list their business. Maybe we call it create a listing. As a business owner, I want to create a listing. And then maybe I want to edit my listing. Hopefully this gives you guys a little bit clearer idea of what this looks like, mapping it out. This is a tool that I use a lot called Miro, and it's free, that you guys can use for this process if you don't have a big wall or a bunch of sticky notes. I'm a super nerd and I have a really big baggie full of sticky notes. Does anybody have questions after seeing this part of the process? All right. Cool. So now is for the magical part. Get ready. So here's how we define our MVP. We've got this map, this timeline, and then with our impact statement in mind, our impact statement is the guiding question, right? So if Rodrigo's impact statement is, I want 100 users to be connecting through music once a week, right? We can ask ourselves for each item in our timeline, is this absolutely necessary for 100 users to be connecting once a week, right? And so if it is, it gets to go up above the line. Or a lot of times the line is below and it goes below that. And then once we do that for our whole timeline, we end up with a simplified version of this user story. And that is what becomes our MVP. And it's really nice as a founder, I've found, because you're not losing everything that's in your head, right? It's still all there. It's still in the timeline. And what we do a lot of times is we draw another line and we say, what's in the next version? What's in the next version? And then what you end up with is a very clear, impact-driven product roadmap, which is super useful to show investors, because you're going to say to them, here's what I've built. I built this MVP. We're getting this traction. We're this close to achieving our impact statement. And with your money, I will build exactly this, the next version. So it's a very clear step-by-step of where your company will go. And the next version might get tweaked or changed based on what you learn from testing that MVP. But you'll have this working map. And if you do it in Miro, it makes it really simple. You can always go back to it. So I'm just going to do that real quick here. Draw a line and say, you know what? I'm not up to putting up advertisements yet. So we're only going to do word of mouth in our first version, right? The blog is too much, but we definitely need a landing page, somewhere to send someone, right? We might not actually need an app, because we can use a Google map to let them view businesses, right? So that's necessarily, they don't necessarily need to filter by food and drink in order to achieve my impact statement of helping businesses increase their happy hour sales, right? It's a nice to have. But I would like them to be able to view the business details and be able to call the business. Those things seem like pretty simple things. Sharing a promo code, not important yet. We'll get there because we've got word of mouth. And so instead of creating a listing, you can also add sticky notes that are a little more geared towards this MVP. So maybe instead of creating a listing, they fill out a form to add their company to my Google map, right? And then they're not able to edit, but that's just how it is for now. Because with just these, I would be able to achieve that impact statement. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. Any questions about prioritizing sticky notes? Cool. All right, I'm gonna go back here. Okay, so once we've mapped our MVP, where do we go from here? What I did with my startup, and what I do for startups now, and what anyone can do, is to use no code tools to create this MVP. So this step in the process is pretty cool because it didn't actually exist like 10 years ago. There really weren't a lot of no code tools that you could use. You really actually had to hire people to build digital products from scratch. But now we've got all kinds of cool stuff that we can string together to create our MVP. So it all depends on what yours looks like. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have specific questions about your MVPs. Because I'm just nerding out on all these no code tools and they're in my head. So happy to share and help you guys determine which ones would work for yours. I will go through for the Happy app. Like I was saying, we could probably use a Google map to view the businesses on the map. And then, to fill out a form, Google actually has a lot of great resources where I could have them fill out a Google form that's connected to a Google spreadsheet, and I can have the Google spreadsheet connected to a Google map. It's all right there already. And all that I have to do is set that up with the no-code tools that Google has already built. And this will actually allow me to get real customers on board, to get real businesses to share it, and to track whether whether businesses are submitting the form to create their listing and whether people are viewing my Google map. So that's just one example of how this could work with no code tools. Does anybody have any questions about no code stuff? Cool. All right. Oh, Rodrigo.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm taking over this presentation.
Perfect.
Sorry, I've been using SendGrid, but it's not completely no code. We do need to do some coding. Can you talk a little bit about Mailchimp? How do you use it? Is it like a kind of target, like users to send emails? How is that?
Yeah, Mailchimp. Mailchimp works just like I think the features might be a little more limited than SendGrid with targeting the subscribers, but you can definitely filter into segments and then say, a segment only send to people in Denver or whatever. And then you can send it out, and that's a totally free feature that Mailchimp has.
Nice. So Mailchimp, by the email address, it identifies the location?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's kind of creepy, but they know.
Interesting. All right. I'll definitely check that out. Thank you.
Yeah. And Rodrigo, it seems like, Zoom is a good starting point maybe for yours, although you might need some more sophisticated video chat. Oh, no, because you're only doing audio. That's right.
Yes.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, that's only audio for now. We do think about videos in the future, but not for now.
Have you heard of Clubhouse?
Yes.
Yeah. I wonder if, have you tried testing through Clubhouse?
Yes. Well, their idea, although they are audio only, they are very different than ours.
Okay.
Because theirs are, excuse me, I need to take some water.
No worries.
Sorry.
That's a good reminder. I will too.
So they are live only, and we are no live only. So they do not record content at all, right? And we only do it asynchronously, I would say. It's like you record something and then someone comes anytime and records something on top of what you do.
Cool.
So it's not a live thing. It's,
Okay.
yeah, you create like in different times. You just leave it there.
Ah, that's such a cool idea.
Thank you.
I can't wait to use it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, it's already available. I mean,
Yeah. What's the name of it?
it's Zip Stage.
Zip Stage. Okay.
Yeah, but
I will
again,
look
it's
it
Android only for now. It's not iOS. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure what you're using.
I have an iPhone. Ah.
Yeah. Oh, that's too bad for US because here it's mostly iOS, but we are kind of targeting our. When I say we, it's like my friend and I. We are targeting our home country, which is Brazil. So, and there is mostly Android, so that's why.
Yeah, and that's great because you know your customers, you know their persona. They usually have an Android. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. Laura, you have a question? Or you?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was really impressed with when I first heard you present on your startup elephant, what is it? Elephant.
Good elephant.
Good elephant. Thank you. Was that you faked it. Like you had this thing that looked like an app, but it just, it went to a Google spreadsheet or this or that. And you did the scheduling like behind the scenes, but the people thought the software was doing it all, but the people were doing that. And I always thought that was a real powerful story that before you have tons of users, you can kind of fake your MVP. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah. And then that reminds me too that, and maybe I'll add it to my final slide there, but no code tools are great, and just manual, like concierge type service is another great way to test. You can build your MVP around even stuff that you're doing, picking up the phone and calling someone. Through a lot of my startup, first years, we were just pretending to be the app, like Laura was saying, and someone would submit a request to do an event at one of our host spaces, and we would pick up the phone and call them and make sure that it worked for them, and then send an email back to the event creator. And they thought it was just magic. Great, they confirmed it. So that way works pretty darn good.
Yeah, and
it
validates your solution before you have to go spending tons of money on paying a software developer.
Totally. Anybody else have any other questions? I have my my contact info up here. You can check out my website. There's some more info about, what is an MVP, more info about the steps in the mapping sessions, and that's at alliereitz.com. And please use my little code here and connect with me on LinkedIn if you're interested. I'd love to follow your guys' journey.